do you mean?
You blocked your kids.
Yeah, it says audience. You have to select audience, and it says either yes or no. I say no. Doesn't fucking do anything.
Oh, I don't know.
I feel like you have a better chance
Working
getting
with
kids
the
to
group
watch it than getting adults to watch.
Oh, hell yeah, for sure. Because my content's fucking stupid. Just straight up dumb shit, yeah. I'm not gonna get adults to watch a Miami spring break vlog.
Yeah, exactly. So why would you want them?
Because then it's gonna be like straight 5-year-olds. Like,
So
seriously.
views are views.
These are not views.
The 5-year-olds views.
Bro, if I make a Discord one day or something though, it's just gonna be straight.
Okay.
Like, I had one of this. I had one of my viewers that made one, and then they invited everybody from chat. I was like, oh my god, I gotta leave this. It's good now. Perfect, bro.
No, just not.
Let's go. We're in geology again, talking about rocks. You guys fuck with rocks or what? Bro, stop touching my boobs, bro. Stop feeling my leather. Element used to make cell phones. Copper. Listening to Central C, then you realize I was live type shit. How was that? What songs were you listening to? It's in the book.
Page 86.
87. Okay, Em. W edits was good, bro. It's good, W edits. Please stop spamming. Nope. He's gonna have to take that out.
It's his. How buried. Or, but we didn't write that one. Where? 72.
It was, yeah.
I thought I meant 12 at night today.
It's not on there.
Yeah, but
It's a lab book assignment, so it's not written there. It's always written. You look right here. April 3rd. It's assigned it earlier. It's actually due on Tuesday, and it's to discuss it today.
Teacher walk my chat. Let's go. And clip that shit.
I don't know how much more it takes. Okay, I guess not this one. Why did it come out? I know, that's what I'm saying. Okay. Why does it
College trip, man.
We got this. I saw it somewhere. It's I voted this.
the smart book assignment is always, let that Yours is what's in smart. The only thing that goes up on, there's a spot on.
Oh man, is it buffering again? Oh no, my dad called me. Damn. Chat, can you hear me? Chat my back. Alright. Give her that back.
Give it back.
Yeah.
Are you done?
No, I'm not done.
I'm good. In the book, it says graphite. No, let me see what you
Bless you.
I don't got graphite. I was just at
Just don't trust her.
Are you all discussing pupil ratios? Have you all discussed yet among yourselves? How are you all on discussing?
I think it's
There's only 12. Yeah.
Oh, that shit. I left my high school today to attend college classes. What a dog. Love you, man. Tell them to be quiet. I need to walk in.
So why don't we go ahead and discuss it as a class? some of y'all did not, a lot of you did not have the work done ahead of time. I'd asked for it to be done on Tuesday, knowing that you're gonna discuss it today, but, you know, still is to do it. Or not everybody, some people got it done. But let's go ahead and look at what the questions are. And what you all come up with, would it be possible to manufacture the cell phones if the world crisis prevented it from importing minerals and elements? We could not import the minerals and elements. Will we be able to, do we manufacture cell phones in the US to begin with? Where did the Apple phones come from? Anybody have any idea? China, what I'm guessing. What other phones are Samsung and I don't know who else. I assume they're all manufactured someplace else. Not positive about that, didn't look it up. But, kind of like we manufacture them here, would we be able to manufacture the cell phones in the US if we couldn't import materials?
No.
No. Would not be able to, because you all found that we were reliant on other countries for the resources that were in there. What was the highest reliance that we had on something that is in the cell phone? Or just one of,
Gallium and.
gallium,
Indium.
indium?
Those are used for the screen.
Okay. So two things that we get them from elsewhere, the fluorine, 100% importing, at least when this book was written. Carbon, which I can't imagine is going to import 100% carbon, but they were saying we import 100% of the carbon. Indium, quartz, we have plenty of quartz, but maybe not the quantity at one place to be able to import it. Lithium, gallium, barium, silver, manganese, tungsten, copper, relying on other countries to make those. That's the second part of that question. And then what evidence it was for, it was telling us how much we lied percent-wise.
I'm watching myself.
And then referring to, the information we had earlier, the uses of the minerals reported in the spreadsheet, if we couldn't import the materials and manufacture them, if we were manufacturing them here, if we were relying 100% on, foreign suppliers, if it was, what would our lifestyle be like? Be what?
Like the Amish.
Yeah, we get, like the Amish?
Look at the phone. Look at the phone.
The cell phones would definitely be a luxury. Don't know whether or not we'd be able to even have the power to be able to use them, but, yeah, just to be very, very different. Hey, class would be better, you all wouldn't be disturbed by cell phones. Hey, that wasn't too far back that I didn't have that problem from students. Did you have something else that you were saying? I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying, just innovate, for example, we use this information, we can get it from
Yeah, it's much easier, we've got the computers, we've got the cell phone computers to do all the work we're doing. Things that we do now, we couldn't have done in the time frame that we do now that we did in the past. I mean, when I was writing my thesis, I was using books. And they were, you know, I could get them from around the country, they came mailed to me. But, it was very, very different, whereas now, tip your fingers to get all that information. So it would be like, Morgan said, it's sort of like living back like the Amish. Now, did anybody pay attention to the press conference, big party they did in the Rose Garden, yesterday on tariffs? And I forgot to watch it when it came on, I was busy working on something. But, does that, what? Is that a concern? Yeah, we, more of a cause of if things are parts, parts that are going to be, things are being made here, if the parts come from overseas, we are relying on other countries for some of the parts, not just the raw materials, but the parts we're relying on. So the parts are, for most country, there's some, was he really go 25% or did he go less than that? He was gonna go 25% on anything.
I thought it was like 20% more on cars.
Yeah, there was on cars, but I think he was talking about 25 on anything. Some things, I think it was 10% tariffs, but it would increase the cost. So if we needed to import raw materials, the cost of that raw material will go up. Use it in manufacturing, that would cause whatever the manufacturer to go up in cost. Maybe getting prohibited in cost, prohibited to make something. Anybody else have comments to make as, see, what concerns do you have about the reliance on foreign sources? Do you have similar concerns about U.S. sources for essential minerals that are controlled by private companies based in the United States? What if the companies were based elsewhere? Okay, how would your views, if at all, how would your views change, if at all, if you consider manufacturing of U.S. companies in other countries where they more easily obtain minerals? Anything you want to say about any of that? Just something for us to watch, something for us to be aware of, that we are reliant worldwide just even for the raw sources. If we had that manufacturing plant here, if we started opening up, building manufacturing plants here to build these, we still have to have materials to build it. So, and we got some conflicting things going on with, we're working on a contract with the Democratic Republic of Congo to get some essential raw elements, rare earth elements. That's one where there's human rights issues there, slave labor there, they have kids working there, and so it's, just ordered a book called Blood Cobalt, or Cobalt Red is what it's called. Cobalt's usually blue. This is that it was based on what's going to be happening there if we get that contract, and we had avoided it for a long time, but apparently we do have contracts there. We'll see if that contract's not done for it, so we'll see. So conflicts with what administration's doing this on one end and something else on the other end, whether or not he knows one of them has a contract. If I know about it, you should know about it. That didn't go as lively as I was hoping it might go. Just really hope everybody would get that done, so you can really debate among yourselves. Didn't hear a whole lot of that. Of course, it's not a whole lot of debate problem. It's yeah. That was one of them. Okay. Yes, I need to start. Anything else we need to talk about before I start into the lecture? Oh, it's quiet out there.
Do we need to start in here now? Or are you gonna just go?
I will look at them when you all, at the next test, I will be looking at them again. talking about geologic time and trying to comprehend this vast amount of time, 4.6 billion years. We try to grasp it. We will learn how rocks are dated, and we'll look at relative age, relative time, and relative absolute time. Relative is just, the age is something in comparison to something else. Is it younger, is it older, that kind of thing. Whereas absolute is not an absolute, but absolute is it's closer to a time frame. And we'll talk about that. We'll learn, next class period, we'll learn about how to determine that will be relative age. The next class, we'll learn about radioactive dating. That way we can figure out absolute age. Today we'll work on the relative age of rocks. Now we'll do something in relation to something else. And this is a video just to talk about the vast amount of time and try to put a little bit of perspective on it.
I'm standing next to some mountains that are millions of years old. And the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. How do I even wrap my mind around that length of time? That's a good question.
How can you imagine 4.5 billion years? How does that compare to the amount of time that humans have been around? A geologist gave us the idea to use a football field as a metaphor, and that's exactly what we're going to do. At this end zone, we've got the present, and at this end zone is the moment our sun goes. Earth's entire history stretches a full 100 yards in between. Every inch is 1.3 million years. Let's start at the beginning and take a walk through Earth's entire history. For the first few 100 million years,
Can you imagine that every inch is 1.3 million years old? That's things that old said. So every inch on that football field, that is the vast amount of time we're trying to represent.
the Earth was bombarded by rocks from outer space, but now it's starting to calm down. And way up here, 3.8 billion years ago, life began. We're talking simple life. Single cells floating in the vast ocean. Now these cells are figuring out new ways to get energy. They're evolving to harness the power of the sun. Photosynthesis starts past the 20-yard line.
Last time I talked about that, up at Lake Superior, the iron deposits that were there, and the red coloring that happened then, that was in there. Those rocks are being formed during this time period you're talking about, and they were being oxidized during this time period when there was now oxygen because of these plants that had evolved.
The air here is mostly carbon dioxide and nitrogen, but right on here, little green cells start making oxygen. And up here, about 2.3 billion years ago, oxygen starts building up in the atmosphere. We're halfway down the field, and we just got the kind of atmosphere that humans can breathe. For the next 1.5 billion years, it's paradise for single cells of every variety. But as we move down the field, cells start working together. And by the time we reach the 18-yard line right here, there's lots of complex critters floating around. It's 800 million years before the present, and things are about to get really interesting. Here at the 13-yard line, we've got an ozone layer. And here, a sudden explosion of diversity. Fungi, sea anemones, mollusks. 530 million years ago, animals take their first steps on land. In the ocean, fish appear. Land plants, insects, sharks, amphibians. It's been 4 billion years since we started, and here at the 5-yard line, we're just starting to see the first mammals and dinosaurs. We see Stegosaurus dinosaurs right here about 176 million years ago, but we don't see the T-Rex until about 4.5 feet from the end zone, about 68 million years ago. Look, the T-Rex is closer to us in the present than it is to the Stegosaurus way back there. Whoa, and there's a catastrophe at the 1-yard line. 66 million years ago, a meteor, or volcanoes, or climate change, or all three, killed 75% of all species. But life rallies. This yard is the yard of mammals. We got armadillos, giant whales, wolves, and here a foot away, the great apes, our family. Hippos, mammoths, lions, Lucy, almost human but not quite, saber-toothed tigers, cattle. Then 200,000 years ago, this is where we find humans that look like us. That's just a few of the names from the end zone, the width of this light bulb. This is all of human experience, but everything we call civilization, agriculture, cities, books, science, these don't appear until we're 2 hairs breadth from the end zone. The width of this filament.
Did you grasp that? I like that video just because it kind of puts it in perspective how insignificant we are for a time period of the earth. With just, the size of the filament. So here's how we represent time when we put it on a piece of paper. And I hope everybody's paying attention to what's going on here. Phones, get the phones put away. Everybody's paying attention through the video, get other things going on. Okay, so melt time is represented here. This is not to scale, but Precambrian. This is 4 billion years right here, and the rest of this is a 500 million. So, or half a billion. So it's not to scale, and this is the time when most of that football field that he was walking across, and we had, this time period, that there was oxygen in the atmosphere. Let's look at the chart where we have Precambrian time period, and there's some break in Precambrian up into different sections. I'm not going to do that because we usually just talk about everything past Precambrian time period. We have the Paleozoic era, the Mesozoic era, the Cenozoic era. And that is broken into, we're looking at the Paleozoic. And this is a time of trilobites. These are the ancestors of our roly-polies. Is that what we call them here? Little bugs, roly-polies? I'm not sure what they're called here. The critters that crawl around, pick up a rock outside, and you'll see them underneath there. And they curl up into little balls. So these are the ancestors, and the time that the trilobites lived was during this Paleozoic time period. We have this line right here, and this is all of a sudden, instead of being just this microscopic animals that were there were a few other things, but primarily it was all microscopic. All of a sudden we have a burst of fossils in the rock record. This is because they developed hard parts. You had a shell on the outside, something that can be preserved. Before that, it was just an algae. There wasn't anything really, or very little, to be preserved. So there was not much of a record, but all of a sudden we have these trilobites, and they actually shed their shells. So each critter produces lots of different shells. So one critter had lots of shells because of, or fossils because of that. Of course, not everything gets preserved. So the Cambrian time period, that is the first one, right here. And then the Ordovician time period, and this is the first fossils of coral and fish in the ocean here. The trilobites were also in the ocean. The Silurian time period, we have some true land plants. First time there are land plants. Then Devonian is the next period. We've got some amphibians, some insects, some shark teeth, shark fossils occurring then. And then in the U.S., we have the Mississippian time period. This is where we have a lot of conifers, trees that are forming, and then the Pennsylvania time period. The Pennsylvania, Mississippi, and that's where most of our coal is coming from. All these fossils that, the swamps there around, and they're making all this coal during this time period. Over in Europe, it's called the Carboniferous, which sounds like a lot of coal over there too. And then it ends with the Permian. And then there was a big change in what was happening. We had great extinction that occurred at the end of the Permian. And that's where this guy there said 77% of species went extinct. I was always told 66%, but that's a large percentage of the species went extinct in the ocean, some in the land. These are species, we wiped out everything. And then we have the Mesozoic time period, the time of the reptiles. So we have our first dinosaurs, and they'll be small dinosaurs. We have mammals, we have turtles, we have crocodile fossils in the Triassic. Then we have Jurassic, we have the first fossil bird. And then Cretaceous is when the big dinosaurs were. And then another extinction occurred. What happened there, we don't know for sure, but there was a climate change that the plants couldn't live, and so the dinosaurs didn't have anything to eat because their food source was going away. So it wasn't necessarily overnight with the extinction of all the dinosaurs, but it was over a period of time that the dinosaurs went extinct, and which gave the mammals a chance to start living. They weren't being chased down by dinosaurs anymore. They were a good food source for dinosaurs. So the Cenozoic is the age of the mammals. And we'll just primarily talk about the tertiary and quaternary periods. And there's a lot of epochs that were during that time period. They're all divided up by changes, how different animals evolved from one type of animal to another. The Pleistocene is real important to us because that's the period of the ice ages, which are the ones that affected our area here in Kansas City. And then we have the Holocene, which is either now, some people say the Holocene is gone, and we've got other names that we can sometimes use for what we're in now, but we'll go with the Holocene because that's what's in our book. So what do you need to know about all this? Let's go back. Just be kind of familiar with some of these terms. I don't expect you to memorize it. I think I passed these out earlier this year that is just a chart to help you remember some of these. But Precambrian, just remember that's the first one. That's one you do need to know. And it's 4 billion years. And then the Cambrian is the start of the Paleozoic. It was all the first of the fossils that were in the fossil record. And the dinosaurs were in the Mesozoic time period. And the Cenozoic was the age of mammals. Just the basic things that you should be aware of. There are these symbols that we will be using later on. That we'll use them on geological maps. We're not going to memorize those either, but know where to look them up to see. Actually, you all don't have this chart. It's not in your lab book anymore. It's in the PowerPoint. It's That's all I can say. It used to be your flat, but they took it out. We've got similar ones, and they don't have symbols on it, but whenever we need symbols, we need to figure it out. Okay, that is just a chart of time scale. And now we are going to figure out if we have a rock, is it in the Cambrian time period, or is it in the Pennsylvania time period? We're gonna figure out the relative age of it. To determine that, we're gonna use 8 principles. And I'm gonna principle of uniformitarianism, I'll talk about that one first. Principle of original horizontality, and you all already know that when we talked about it earlier, that is the principle that originally the rocks were laid down horizontally, sedimentary rocks, they were laid down horizontally. Bottom of the ocean, bottom of the desert, basically horizontal. Principle of superposition, you already know this one, the ones on the bottom are the older ones. They were positive first, we'll talk more about that. And we will talk about the principle of cross-cutting relationships, the principle of unconformities, principle of inclusions, principles of lateral visible continuity. Sometimes it's called visible continuity, sometimes it's called lateral continuity, so I just threw both words in there. Principle of faunal succession. So, principle of uniformitarianism. This was a principle that was developed by James Hutton. It was in the paper in the Royal Society of Edinburgh, back in 1785. Do you remember that date? 1785, James Hutton presented this paper called The Theory of the Earth with Proof and Illustration. He was a well-known gentleman, Scottish gentleman, living in the area. He was a farmer, but he was a gentleman farmer, which I think that means he owned the land and other people farmed for him. But at that time, Edinburgh was an area of just all kinds of scientific discovery going on. We also had a lot of theologians there, a lot of different debates going on that way. It was a atmosphere of a lot of skepticism, a lot of doubt about everything. And his paper said, what did it say? The earth can be explained in terms of natural forces we see today. The things that are happening on the earth's surface are the same as the things that were happening in the past. It's away. Things that were happening in the past are the same as what was happening today. So when we see sedimentation, he was saying the same things happened in the past. And the earth, how come I don't have the right page there? And the earth's history has not been a series of universal or quasi-universal catastrophes, but it's been a primary long, gradual development process. It was thought that everything happened, anything that happened, always happened and suddenly happened. Think of the Great Flood, Noah's Ark. Everything changed there because it's one event that happened. So the principal geological processes there, the same processes that happened in the past. And so he was looking at, he was going through his property, and he was looking at the land, and he was seeing that the rocks were weathering away, going into streams, going into the oceans, and being deposited there. And he could see these layers. He could see fossils in the rocks on his property, fossils that should belong in the ocean. He was looking, he noticed the difference between igneous rocks and sedimentary rocks. So he was putting all this together so that it can explain, what he sees there can explain everything that's happening on our Earth. So that's a kind of overlying principle that we have to all accept that is correct, so that everything else is based on that one principle. All the other ones that will follow. So we're going to determine the relative age. Relative age. That is like this class begins after rush hour and ends before rush hour. After morning rush hour ends before evening rush hour. So relative time, relation to something else. Absolute time, if this class started a little earlier, I would say, it starts at lunchtime. Not exact time, it's lunchtime. So absolute is more exact, but not exact. And I had just watched that pre-lab video that you all were supposed to have watched. I'm guessing they probably haven't. I'm going to show it, because covers a lot of material. I like the way he explains things.
Hello, this is Callan Bentley. Welcome back for another pre-lab video. You are getting ready now for a very exciting week in lab. This is the week in lab where you establish some of the basic ideas of how we figure out how old rocks are, both in terms of their relation to other rocks, and then also in terms of basically assigning a numerical date to those rocks. This is really cool because once you master these skills, you're able to get out there in the real world and figure out what happened and when it happened. So we've got a couple of basic principles that we use when we are thinking about how old rocks are. The first of them is the principle of superposition, which says in layered rocks that form on the Earth's surface, such as sedimentary rocks and also volcanic rocks, the ones at the bottom are the oldest, and then the ones at the top are the youngest, because these things are forming on Earth's surface. So this applies to any layered rock, such as a sedimentary rock or a volcanic rock, but it wouldn't apply to something like a granite that intrudes from below. Another key principle that's illustrated here is the principle of original horizontality. The layers depicted in this block diagram are horizontal, which is how they form, more or less. And if we find them in some position other than horizontal, that suggests that they have been tilted or deformed, rotated since the time of their original deposition. One other concept that is conveyed here is that certain fossils basically can serve as timestamps on the rocks which include them. So for rock layer C here, for instance, to contain this particular fossil, it must have been deposited when that organism was alive. Another principle that we use is the principle of lateral continuity. This is a kind of common sense applied to geology here. If we find a situation like a canyon out west where we find a limestone down as the lowest layer on both sides of the canyon and a red shale above that, and then a nice yellow sandstone above that, that would not require two separate stories to tell, say, the story on the left side of the canyon versus the right side, because it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to basically imagine the situation before the canyon was there, before it cut into what used to be three continuous layers stacked one on top of the other. Another principle that you'll be using this week in lab is the principle of relative dating by inclusions. I like to refer to this as the raisin bread principle because you can't make raisin bread unless you already have raisins. So here you've got a rock unit A and you've got a rock unit C. There's also an ancient erosional surface, an unconformity, which we'll talk more about here in just a moment, and that's labeled as B. But the key thing here to understand with regard to inclusions is that there are pieces of rock unit A included in rock unit C. You can't break off a piece of something unless it already exists. So in this case, you know that for sure rock A has got to be older than rock unit C. Otherwise, there's no way for younger C to include pieces of older A in its makeup. This diagram here illustrates a couple of principles. One is that principle of original horizontality. So rock layers A, B, C, and D here would have originally been deposited horizontally. And then at some point after they were deposited, they got folded, all right, probably due to some sort of tectonic stress squeezing these rocks from the side. That folding may have been accompanied by uplift, which encouraged erosion. So you've got that erosional surface there labeled E. It's another unconformity. And then sometime after that, sedimentary deposition resumed at the site with layers F and G being deposited on top of that. The other key principle that is being illustrated here, though, is this. There is an igneous dike that cuts through layers A, B, C, D, F, and G, and that dike is labeled as H here. You'll notice that there's contact metamorphism on either side of the dike where the hot magma that squirted into that fracture cooked the rock immediately adjacent to it. And you'll also notice that dike H cuts across, say, the unconformity surface, E. So therefore, that dike must be younger than the unconformity. It also cuts across all the rock layers that we mentioned, so therefore that dike, H, has got to be the youngest thing in this diagram. One way of summarizing the principle of cross-cutting relationships is that the cutter is always younger, so whatever's doing the cutting has got to be younger. Here's an example of that, just looking at some igneous and metamorphic rocks, no sedimentary rocks at all. So here, basically, you had an original rock, which was metamorphosed to make rock A.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the principle of original horizontality. We look at this rock unit here. This is in your textbook that you read. There's a block diagram of Minor Canyon. That's just a hypothetical location. If we look at Larson Formation, Foster City Formation, Hamiltonville Formation, and Cedar Gulch. All of these are horizontal. Principle of original horizontality. They were originally laid down horizontally. So if we look at the rocks that were below it, we look at the Lundgren Formation, the Brooklyn Formation, the Leak Junction Formation, Tarver Formation. Use the principle of original horizontality, that we know that originally was laid down horizontally. So when we're trying to figure out the history of the area, what happened there, we know that there was an uplift that caused those rocks to tilt. So it tells us something happened in the past. We know that tilt happened before the Larsenton Formation, because the Larsenton Formation is flat on top of that line at the top of all those ones on the bottom. So principle of original horizontality is going to help us figure out relative age of rocks. Here's some rocks that are out at Hoover Dam showing not horizontal by any means now. We've got a slant right there. We also have some faulting that's going on, lots of faulting there. But originally laid down horizontally. Principle of superposition. You already know that the rocks on the bottom originally were the oldest, because if we have the ocean basin and the sediments are coming in, the sediments they sink down to the bottom. And they get pressed into a rock layer. And then we have more sediments coming in. and another rock layer being formed. So the one on the bottom is the oldest, and as they go further up, you're gonna be
The dab, bro.
crystal superposition. The rocks on the bottom are the oldest. So if we look at the Larsonton Formation, Phosphor City Formation, the Hamlinville Formation, and the Skinner Gulch Formation, which is the oldest formation of those four? Okay, who am I gonna call on? Who's ready? Spencer. Which one of those four is the oldest?
Which one did you say?
Larsonton, Phosphor City, Hamiltonville, and Skinner Gulch.
Larsonton,
Because, why?
because it's at the bottom.
Because it's bottom, horizontal layers. Now, Spencer, what do you think about the ones that were below it? Which one do you think is the oldest one there?
Lutgrad Formation.
Look around, looks like it's the oldest. It's, if you gotta picture it, turn it horizontal, picture it before that full that happened, it caused it this, or tilt, whatever happened to it. Before that happens, you, in your mind, you switch it back up. So pull out your lab book, page
Clip that shit, Jack. Clip that
221.
shit. I just got clipped. Somebody said, hell nah, you're cooked.
And then made a cake for you.
Aight.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I've been going through the slides, and it's like, the slides that you had at the beginning of the semester had more words for notes, and it's like, even going. And I asked
Big-
why.
Today,
Like, in general, like, I feel like the last 3 chapters, the slides haven't had much, like, noteworthy things. Like, it'll just be like diagrams, but not things to write down in our notes. So, it's hard to decipher what we'll need for the test to remember, and then just a picture to remember.
pay attention to it all, and that's all I can say. I mean, I don't have everything written down on PowerPoint. But I thought they were coming the same the whole semester long, but you're seeing something different from what I see.
Cooked.
Maybe my earlier ones were much too wordy.
And I think they were great for notes, but these ones, it's like nothing to write notes on, I look it up yourself.
Okay. Pay particular attention when I write things on the board, or when I say, writes this down, or I repeat it 3 times. Those are probably things that you should be writing down. Okay, on this page, our goal, we are going to identify your lesson structures and enable you to interpret the relative age of rocks in a geological cross-section. What we have is an imaginary cross-section here. We're going to analyze this piece of a layer cake that's up there. Each side of the block is a vertical cross-section. So they've taken the earth and cut it, and so we're seeing the side view, like what we see along the highway, where it's been cut, where we can see part of it. Notice the surface is between the layers, where 2 different layers touch each other, we call that a contact. So the little space right here between the cake and the gelatin there, that is called a contact. And between the gelatin and the cream, that is called a contact. When you make a cake, in case you all have not done this or never imagined it, you put the lowest layer down first, and then you put the icing on top. In this one, we've got a 3-layer cake, so very thin layer. But we've got the yellow cake, and then we have a gel we put on top, and then we have a white icing that we, or fluff or something we put on top of that, and then some more yellow cake, and then the red gel, the white fluff, and the yellow, and then the icing on top. So we're talking superposition here. So on the left, so on the left side of this cake, you're gonna label the order that they were deposited, 1 to 6, with 1 being the oldest. 1 to 8. So get your lab book out, start writing in it, and label on the left side of the cake, 1 to 8, which layer is the oldest.
Too much water for this.
Then they want you to draw a line representing where the contacts are between the different layers. Then on the right side, you are going to put an arrow to each contact, labeling them 1 through 7, with 1 being the oldest contact. The imaginary line between 2 layers is the contact. Same thing with rocks. So did you come up with something like this? I hope so.
I'm so smart.
Let's go across the plate relationships. As the video showed us, is that it's something that's cut across something else. And it's important to remember that it had to be there first in order to be cut through. The cake had to be there before the knife could cut it. So principle superposition. Once you look at this, it figure out different things you can look at there to figure out which is older than the other, something that cuts across. And I
Just
see
figure
3
out
things
twice,
there
write that
that
down.
you can find that represent the principle of cross-cutting relationships. I'm looking at all these rocks. I have this brown rock being deposited, I have this yellow rock being deposited, and this brown rock being deposited. Now, we could have had these other rocks deposited, of Fleet Junction, and this other small one over here, those could have been deposited next, or this granite could have been intruded into it. The granite cuts across the blood red, the vertical formation, and a piece of the tar burst. So all of those had to be in existence before it could be cut across. And then this dike, another igneous intrusion. It cuts across all of these. It cuts across this area where we've had this disruption, where we have flat rocks on top. It's cutting across the brown rock, the yellow rock, cutting across the granite. It's cutting across this Larsenton. It's not going any further though. So we know that it happened after the Larsenton, but it wasn't after the Phosphoricity because it doesn't cut into the Phosphoricity. So it gives us an idea of the relative age of something. We may not know exactly what age it is, but we know in relation to something else. We can look
third.
at the fossils in the
Say the
sedimentary rocks to get an idea of the age, but still it's gonna be a relative age.
See, brother.
The other one I was looking at, some people would say this unconformity, which we'll talk about just a minute, be one, or this river that cut across everything. All those rocks had to be there before that river could cut across it. So we know that's the last thing that happened there. So let's put it all together, step by step. First layer is being deposited, that brown layer. We have the ocean, the sea floor there. Deposits are coming down, being deposited horizontally, for its original horizontality. And then layer after layer after layer, position. We know that you're getting younger as you're going up. So what we're doing is, it's just kind of untangling, it's like a puzzle, to untangle what happened in this area. And then, could be that the granite came in right then, an intrusion into the granite at that point. As I said earlier, that it actually could have happened before right then. I mean, this might not have been here at the same time, but there's no way to tell. You can't tell everything. And then there's been some tectonic activity, and it has pushed up the rock, uplifted it, but it hasn't been equal, so there's been a tilt to it. Like our rock here in Kansas City, it is all horizontal, but we're 850 feet above sea level. So it has been lifted up 850 feet, plus that would have gone to the ocean, so it's been lifted up even more than that. But here, the same thing, it was lifted up, but it was at a tilt. Ours was even. And then there's no deposition going on. We have erosion that's occurring. This rock that was on top of it was eroding away, so we had just erosion. And there is more time represented in this erosional surface than is actually represented in the rocks themselves. And we can tell that by the fossils, figure that out. So we're eroding. Crystal unconformity is the next thing I want to talk about.
Better chance of just learning this on my own.
Unconformities, crystal unconformities, that's that. Then another, we had that, we tilled rocks, and then sediments came in, the oceans came back. So we had a transgression of the ocean, bringing in sediments, depositing those sediments, on top of it.
Quit.
And that rock layer, or that imaginary line below this shale layer, it's called an unconformity. And we have different types of unconformities. We have angular unconformities, non-conformities, and disconformities. When I took this class, there was only unconformities. You're special. You get to learn about all these other, give them special names for different situations. The disconformity, this is an erosional surface. You won't always see this erosional surface. Sometimes you just have to look at the fossils to be able to tell there's something there's something missing. But in the diagram, it's really nice. It shows you have an erosional surface with sedimentary layers horizontally below it and sedimentary layers horizontally above it. They could be sedimentary or they could have been a lava flow. But this is a disconformity. This is what you're going to remember, disconformity. Angular unconformity is when the rocks below, sedimentary rocks below, or igneous, if there was a layer of a lava flow, below, come up at an angle, and then we have horizontal sedimentary layers above it. In nonconformity, we have horizontal layers, parallel layers, over top of an igneous or metamorphic body. So below a nonconformity is an igneous or metamorphic body with how do they word it? surface between older element of the older igneous metamorphic rocks and younger rock layers, history layers for probable non. Disconformity, angular conformity, non-conformity. So we're looking at this rock. What type of unconformity is this one right here? Maureen, what do you think about that? What type of unconformity is that? Someone else? Look at that, what does it look like?
I've got a camera.
Coming up at an angle, horizontal on top. An angular unconformity. An angular unconformity. Then we're still recreating this rock unit. We've had more and more layers of sediments being deposited on top. We have an intrusion that has gone through all of these rocks. Maybe all of these rocks. This dike has gone through there. Then erosion again. No more deposition. We have erosion occurring. We see the dike exposed on the surface. And then we have more, the ocean came back, deposited more sediments on top. It cut off the dike right there. And then we have horizontal layers below the unconformity and horizontal layers above the unconformity. So what type of unconformity would that be? Horizontal layers, horizontal layers. Okay, we're gonna take a break. 10 minutes, come back here at 5 till.
Shorty pressed. Pissed. She's fucking pissed. Understandable. Nobody's fucking paying attention. Chat. Nobody's paying attention. She's mad. Shorty better blow up. With the cum. Whoa. Hey, yo. I ain't get more country than this, buddy. I ain't get more country than this, buddy. You can try, but you ain't gonna be more country than me. Shit, let me pull my fucking jeans over my boots. Like a real man. Like polar opposite right now. We got a Nike Tech. And jeans and boots. I gotta walk like I got a Nike Tech on. You gotta walk like you have boots on. Now you. Anybody want to dance? I don't give a fuck. Who cares? I paid for this shit, brick by brick.
I hate it fucking dancing. That fucking cute. You don't care if you get stabbed?
Dude, I went to Taco Naco earlier. That shit was fire.
Yeah, it's good.
Have you been to Taco Naco?
Yeah.
Yeah, that shit's fire.
Where's that at? It's like, damn, it's in the city.
It's by like Dave's Hot Chicken, kind of.
Okay.
He doesn't like Dave's Hot Chicken.
That shit's weak, bro. I haven't had it.
What? Bro, you want to see it?
They told me.
All right, I'll see.